Chapter 1896 Despair and Hope. That night, Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi were sleeping inside the utility room, covered by the several quilts given to them by Delakin. Although the environment here was not as good as their home, this was the best place they had slept in a long time. Suddenly, the doors to the utility room were slammed. Bang! Bang! The two of them, highly sensitive after everything that had happened over time, woke up directly. Delakin's voice came from outside. "The search team is here, get up." Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi were shocked and panicked as they scrambled to their feet and opened the door. Delakin spoke in a low voice to them. "It seems that your identities are indeed not ordinary, and the search team is here for you." Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi hurriedly begged Delakin to help them. They could see from Delakin's eyes that he regretted taking them in. However, if Delakin handed them over now, he would be punished as well. He whispered, "Follow me." He led the two of them to another room, opened the wooden doors in the floor, and there was a cellar. "Hide here. Whether you can escape or not depends on your luck." It was freezing outside, and the two of them could see lights sweeping across the windows. It was even more dangerous to go out, so they had no choice but to trust Delakin. Even though they suspected that Delakin had betrayed them, what choice did they have? The two entered the cellar and hugged each other in their anxiety, but they could no longer sleep. 2 hours later, Delakin opened the cellar doors and told them the good news: the search party had left. However, it is no longer safe here, and there will definitely be people searching the area. They must leave for the city of Hopu City as soon as it gets light. "Hey, I've been through so much for your measly coupons. It's not worth it," Delakin said to Hyun Hae-soo on purpose. His eyes scanned Hyun Hae-soo's body, trying to get him to give him some more valuables. Hyun Hae-soo could only pretend not to see. If he gave the other party all the benefits at once, he would probably be abandoned directly. So they waited until dawn with their eyes open. Delakin had a modified snowmobile, which was a pickup truck modified with tracks instead of wheels. He put the two of them in the back seat and covered them with blankets. Delakin warned them not to make a sound if they encountered anyone on the road who wanted to check them, and that they would usually be fine. As long as they got past this hurdle, they would be safe once they entered the city of Hopu City. The two were on tenterhooks, not expecting so much danger after crossing the border. But now they could only take things one step at a time. The pickup truck headed towards the city, and after a few hours, the car suddenly came to a stop. Outside, the voices of several men shouting could be heard. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi held their hands together tightly, knowing that they had encountered a check. But fortunately, Delakin knew the inspectors and seemed to travel to and from this area frequently. So the other party did not get in the car for inspection and let them pass. The car headed towards the urban area of Hopu City, and the two of them finally let go of their suspended hearts. Their hearts were filled with light, and they felt that a better life was already beckoning to them. Before entering the city, Delakin reminded them, "This is already the urban area of Hopu City, but don't get too happy too soon. Your identities are very unusual, and if the agents of the KG Kingdom want to capture you, they can still do it. After all, this is Hopu City, the border between the two countries. The officials here have exchanges with the people of the KG Kingdom." Hyun Hae-soo's heart lifted again. He thought he had escaped the KG Kingdom, but he didn't expect that he still couldn't escape from their shadow. He said, "As long as I find my uncle, he will protect us." Delakin took a drag of the cigarette Hyun Hae-soo had given him and said lightly, "Don't get your hopes up too high. Maybe they already know you're coming to see your uncle." Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi's hearts were like gourd seeds in water, rising and falling, lifting up for a moment and then dropping, their hearts wavering between hope and despair, almost to the point of breaking. Delakin let out a long sigh. "If I had known your situation was so troublesome, I never would have agreed to help you." He then looked at Hyun Hae-soo again. Hyun Hae-soo knew what he wanted, but he no longer had any extra possessions to give the other party, and could only keep saying that he would repay him after he found his uncle. Delakin saw that there was no profit to be made and had to give up. "How about this, when we get there, don't get off the car. I'll go over there and ask for you." Although he didn't get any more money, Delakin was still very conscientious and responsible, doing things for money and with great principles. The car followed Hyun Hae-soo's address and arrived at the place where his uncle lived. Upon arriving here, Hyun Hae-soo finally understood why Delakin said that his uncle was a formidable figure. Because the living environment here was obviously much better, although it was only the wealthy district of a small border town in the Khotan Empire, it was actually better than the conditions they lived in prison. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi hid in the car with the engine running. Delakin turned his head and said to them before getting out of the car, "I'm a local, so I'll be fine. But if you notice anything strange, just drive away immediately. Head south and meet me near the gas station we passed on the way here." The two nodded eagerly, then watched as Delakin got out of the car. He crossed the road and parked on the opposite side of the road, maintaining a distance from the residential area so that escape would be easy. Delakin entered the residential area, while Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi waited nervously. After about 20 minutes, Delakin returned. He quickly got into the car, but his face was a scary shade of white. "Are you sure the address is okay?" Delakin stared at Hyun Hae-soo and said, while starting the car. "Yes, this is the right place." "Then it's over." Delakin took a deep breath. "You must have been exposed. They had someone come early and stake out the area, so when I went to your uncle's, the owner of the house said he didn't even have a nephew in the Keiji kingdom." Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi's hearts went cold. Had their last hope been completely slashed? If they couldn't go to their uncle's, how were they going to survive in this place? They couldn't speak the language, and they were being hunted by the men sent by Commander Sane. Their chances of survival were slim. Hyun Hae-soo was unwilling to accept this. He grabbed Delakin's arm and said, "Please take me back. This time, I want to see my uncle in person. He will definitely recognize me." He even suspected that Delakin was saying this on purpose in order to get more money out of him. "You will receive your share of the benefits when the time comes." Delakin was also getting a little angry. "Do you think I'm lying to you? Believe it or not, as soon as you set foot in the entrance to that neighborhood, you will be arrested immediately." Hyun Hae-soo's eyes had lost their light. Lee Sung-mi stroked his back to comfort him, but at the moment, was she not also feeling utter despair? She looked at Delakin and begged, "Brother, can you help us? If you can't help us, then we have no choice but to die." Delakin's face was dark as he drove the car forward. After a while, he said impatiently, "There is only one last way I can help you. You can go to the nearby church and say that you are followers of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Perhaps the church can help you." Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi had no other options. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, they would grasp it as a straw. Delakin dropped them off near the church in Hopu City, let them out, and drove off. Before leaving, he said to the two, "I've figured it out. The reason you were searched last night was because the woman you saw first reported you." After saying this, he quickly drove away as if he were getting rid of a nuisance. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi were filled with sadness. With their last hope, they went to the church and knocked on the doors. After a while, a priest opened the door. The two hurriedly told the priest that they were devout believers of the Eastern Orthodox Church and hoped to receive the church's protection. But before they could finish, the priest impatiently waved them away. "Go away. It is people like you who cause us so much trouble. Go on, just go." The church doors slammed shut behind them. The young couple stood huddled in the cold wind in front of the church doors, feeling only darkness all around them. After all the trouble they had gone to escape here, they had thought they would be starting a new life, but this was how it had turned out. "If not, then I might as well die. After death, there will be no more problems." These were the thoughts that came to Hyun Hae-soo's mind. He had never felt more helpless and hopeless in his life. An evil thought even rose in his heart. Would it be better to stay in Prison City and pretend not to know about the commander's affair with his wife? As soon as the thought came to him, he felt a sharp pain and then saw Lee Sung-mi's concerned eyes. He raised his hand and gave himself 2 slaps. "No, don't do this, Hae-soo. There will be a way out, there must be a way to survive." Lee Sung-mi desperately grabbed his arm to stop him from harming himself. What other way? Hyun Hae-soo said with a bitter smile. Lee Sung-mi didn't say anything, but reached into her pocket and took out a gold ring. It was a gold ring that Hyun Hae-soo had bought with his meager savings when they got married. Although the price of gold had plummeted, it was still an important industrial material that could be exchanged for food. She handed the ring to Hyun Hae-soo. Let's buy some food first, and then we'll figure something out. Hae-soo, we'll be fine, we'll definitely be fine. Comforted by his wife, Hyun Hae-soo was still desperate, but his mood improved slightly. The two used the gold ring to exchange for 2 loaves of bread at a bakery on the street, and found an abandoned house where they ate the bread while brooding over their future. After this meal, they really had no money left. If they couldn't think of a way out, they would surely starve to death. Looking at her husband, who was emaciated with worry, Lee Sung-mi was filled with grief. If only I had died at the beginning, she blamed herself. If only she had died, the commander would not have troubled her husband. It was all because of her. She made a decision in her heart, but did not tell Hyun Hae-soo. That night, the two of them slept inside the dilapidated house, relying on their sleeping bags, thermal blankets, and plastic bags. The next day, Hyun Hae-soo woke up early. But he suddenly realized that his wife was nowhere to be found next to him, and only a passage written with his fingers on the ground remained. Honey, I'm going to try again at my uncle's house. They probably don't recognize me, so don't worry about me. Hyun Hae-soo's head exploded with a boom. He never imagined that his wife's final thought was the same as his. He also planned to go to his uncle's house alone without his wife, not believing that his beloved uncle would abandon him. But he also knew that such behavior meant great risks. He could very well be arrested and sent back to the KG Kingdom, where he would surely experience unimaginable hell. Sung-mi. Hyun Hae-soo scrambled to his feet in a panic and ran like crazy towards his uncle's address. He already had a bad feeling in his heart, sensing that this time Narumi would never come back. He stumbled and ran on the icy street. When he arrived near his uncle's apartment complex, his pupils suddenly contracted and his blood rushed to his head. It was because he saw several very familiar faces walking out of the complex. They were members of Choi Jae's personal guard. And behind them, Sung-mi had already been arrested and handcuffed. Delakan had not lied to them, this place was indeed extremely dangerous. Hyun Hae-soo's heart sank. He was not a powerful mutant, not to mention that the others were fierce and strong fighters. Charging up at this point was no different from looking for death. Hyun Hae-soo, go! 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 Do you want to run away like a coward? Hurry up! Hurry up! Don't be afraid, don't be afraid! He desperately called out inside, desperate for his body to move as quickly as possible, longing for the power to protect the woman he loved. But as the men led Sung-mi towards a car, one of the soldiers looked up and around, his gaze falling on Hyun Hae-soo. He instinctively hid his body around the corner. Hyun Hae-soo's heart sank. He was, after all, afraid of death. He was afraid of returning to the KG Kingdom. Because he knew that no matter how close Commander Sane had appeared to be to him at the beginning, something like this could never be forgiven. He would rather die than go back. But was he going to just stand there and watch Sung-mi go to hell? He had heard of the cruelty of the Imperial Guards, and if Sung-mi fell into their hands, she wouldn't even be able to die. Hyun Hae-soo desperately covered his mouth, curled up slowly into a ball at the corner of the street, and tried hard to suppress his sobs. He didn't know how long it was, but he had gone numb, and then there was a glimmer in the sky. The sun had come out. Lee Sung-mi had already been taken away by those people. Hyun Hae-soo stood up like a walking corpse. He suddenly felt that there was no place for him in this world anymore. It was so tiring and painful to be alive. If he had known it would turn out like this, he would have chosen to commit suicide with Sung-mi. They had escaped from the KG Kingdom after so much hardship, and he had thought they had gained their freedom. In the end, they were still in a cage. Rumble. The sound of cars came from his ears. Hyun Hae-soo looked towards the end of the road. There were 5 very large and luxurious snowmobiles, all pure white with golden Eastern Orthodox Church insignia. The obvious gold cross emblem on the front of the vehicle represented the prominent status of those people. Thinking about the scene where the church rejected the couple, Hyun Hae-soo's heart rose with endless disgust. Clearly, they only needed to give them a mouthful of food to let the two of them survive, so why were they so cruel? They were supposed to believe in God and save the world, weren't they? Hyun Hae-soo didn't want to live anymore, and he decided to use his own blood to stain the car of those clergymen before he died. This was the last struggle of an incompetent little man. At this time, his eyes were hideous. Facing the car coming from afar, he used all his strength, as if to vent all the pain and despair in his heart, and rushed over. The speeding snowmobile quickly came to Hyun Hae-soo's front, and just as he thought he was going to die, a soft white light suddenly enveloped his body. It was as if he had hit a thick sponge cushion, and there was no pain. Plop! Hyun Hae-soo fell to the ground, his eyes vacant. He slowly closed his eyes, still thinking that he had just had a near-death experience, and that he was about to die. The convoy was forced to stop, and several clergymen got out of the vehicles and gathered around him. Suddenly, one of the clergymen said in a startled tone, "Hey! Isn't this the wanted criminal from the KG Kingdom?" Another clergyman said, "So he has indeed fled to this side. Asian faces are quite rare here. What should we do? Should we hand him over to the people of the KG Kingdom?" Hyun Hae-soo wondered in his heart why he was still alive. At this moment, the doors of the snowmobile in the middle opened. A pair of white leather boots stepped on the ground, and a beautiful nun dressed in a cassock got off the vehicle. She was very tall, about 1.8 meters, and she was tall and thin, like a statue carved by Michelangelo. Her slightly sharp, melon-shaped face was beautiful, and her face carried a compassionate expression. The people around her quickly made way. "Sister Leibniz." The nun saw the man lying on the ground. Her face showed compassion, and she folded her hands and said a few prayers. "May God bless this poor man and spare him the pain, cold, and hunger." She said to the clergy around her, "Carry him." The nun gave the order, and naturally the others did not dare disobey, so they helped Hyun Hae-soo up. It was only then that he realized that he was not injured. Confused, he was taken to the cathedral in Hopu City. The priest, who had been very rude to him, also sent him hot water, bread, and a blanket. A glimmer of hope suddenly arose in Hyun Hae-soo's heart. Although he knew this was a bit ridiculous, the person in question was obviously a big shot in the world-renowned Holy See of the Eastern Orthodox Church. If he could get her help, maybe he could save Sung-mi. He gulped down his food, and for a moment, he didn't feel like dying. In the shrine next door, Brittany Leibniz, the morning knight of the Holy See and one of the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, finished praying to the Holy Spirit's cross. Then, using a communication device, she contacted Cardinal Arnold Olive. "Sister Leibniz, how did your negotiations with Commander Ken Sane in the KG Kingdom go?" Leibniz shook her head. "They refused to cooperate with us. If I'm not mistaken, the object we're looking for, the Holy Seal, the Spear of Longinus, is in the hands of Commander Ken Sane. The reason he was able to quickly grow from a low-level officer to a powerful mutant in a poor place like North Africa is the power of the Sacred Seal. Under the circumstances, there is no way he will hand it over to us." Olive frowned. "This is the situation we were most worried about encountering. Although Commander Ken Sane is not a religious leader, in the poor and backward country of North Africa, he has brainwashed all the people in an absolute authoritarian manner, making them blindly and absolutely loyal to him, and he is also able to have the blessing of the power of faith. Under these circumstances, as long as Commander Ken Sane does not leave the KG Kingdom, even the Knights Templar of the Holy See of the Eastern Orthodox Church is not sure that they can take the Spear of Longinus from him. Of course, if a large army attacks forcefully, there is a chance that they can achieve their goal. However, the Eastern Orthodox Church exists in the form of a religion, and for thousands of years, the key to living in harmony with the secular kingdoms has been not to directly participate in secular wars. If this rule is broken, the attitude of all countries in the world towards them will change from now on, which is the last thing the Holy See wants to see. Because of this, he traveled thousands of miles to find Zhang Yi, hoping that this world-class strongman, who is outside the political system, would carry out this task. However, judging from Zhang Yi's attitude, it was clear that he was not willing to get involved in this trouble. Just as Olive was feeling down, a beautiful, but not inappropriate, smile suddenly appeared on the lips of Sister Leibniz. The day of the fall has not yet arrived, but the sin of greed, mammon, has been born prematurely. This is a crisis, but also the best opportunity. If we conceal it again and advance, it will reduce the risk of the end of the world. We cannot afford to hesitate. What we need is a good reason to take the spear of Longinus from Kensane's hands. She smiled meaningfully. I do have a very good idea. It will not involve the Eastern Orthodox Church in worldly disputes, and it will allow us to get the spear of Longinus in a reasonable way.